So it's a little hard to follow the last three talks. I like to tell jokes, but the talk I'm about to do is not one that I normally get to tell most of my jokes about. I was thinking about the cow farting and it was the drovers and how they decided they were going to kill the buffalo so that there was room for the cows, and someone talked about synergy and the balance, and it's like, so we had to kill off all these buffalo that farted so that we could bring in the cows that farted, and we kept the synergy going there in the Midwest. But I'll let you just read this first slide yourself. What I want to talk about is if we don't have Gabe Brown type soil, very clean and mineral rich, how do we, without breaking the budget? I like things that are clean, they're natural, and they don't cost a lot of money. So how at a low cost can we make our animals perform? I venture to say everyone in the room has better genetics than you're seeing expressed on your farms, because your epigenetics, the air, the water, the grass, the mineral, weather, all of those sorts of things do have an effect. Animals that are alkaline tend to resist disease, internal, external parasites. Animals that get acid, lack of minerals drives them acid. Too many of the neighbor's toxins. Does anybody in the room live where the wind does not blow? Seeing no hands, someone somewhere upwind of you is doing something that's detrimental. And as you'll see a little later, the Redmond conditioner is your best line of defense against what's going on there. The four main things that I'll talk about to use that are all natural, and I guess with that I'll go ahead and get started. Oops, did I turn it off? Did I run out of batteries already? I think I ran out of batteries already. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, next slide. So I imagine a lot of you in here with the current prices are doing seed stock sales. I normally prefer to be down there, but as I was watching this morning, I felt like it was easier to see, and I'm going to be holding different things up here. So I decided to stay up here. But fully express the genes you already own. Anybody in here read the book Pottinger's Cats? Francis Pottinger was a doctor. I think he was in the San Francisco area back in the 40s and 50s, and he was doing these adrenalectomies on cats and then figuring out how much of the adrenal glands that he was getting in they had to put to where every single pill for humans, imagine adrenal failure in the 40s and 50s, I guess World War II right after the Depression. Anyway, what he found was he had his cats in two different locations. One location was raw meat and raw milk, and one location was cooked meat and cooked milk. In the cooked meat and cooked milk, in 4 generations they couldn't reproduce. Each generation of cooked meat and milk took 3 generations of raw meat and milk to get the health back. Kind of keep that in the back of your mind as I go through some of these things. If we have not been nourishing our animals with a clean, mineral-rich environment, our genetics suffer. Oops, next, yeah. So direct market, grass-finished beef, some people grain finish. I quit grass finishing 20 years ago, or no, I quit 3 years ago after doing it for 20 years. And then next slide there. If cared for correctly, and by that I mean you're getting adequate minerals in and you're getting the neighbor's toxins out. We can. This is just a quote about Highland cattle. They're from this Thomas Hutley. And next. So good disposition, low maintenance. 40% of the profit on the ranch, I've got this solo cup, which is an entirely different talk, but 40% of the profit on the ranch or the farm is an animal having a calf every year, and 30% is what does it cost to run that cow. 20% is growth, 10% is carcass traits. So 70% work on that. The 30% that helps the feedlot, growth, carcass traits, that does not put a lot of money in your back pocket. Next slide. So, sea salt. There are tidal pool salts, C90, Celtic sea salt. There are old ocean floors that are now in mountains. Redmond, they have a booth out here. Independent Salt Company out of Kansas. Himalayan salt. Those are all old ocean floors. The Vikings throwing their trash overboard into the ocean did not pollute those sources of minerals. My biggest problem with 95+% of the mixed minerals out there is to compete on price, they get some or all of the individual minerals going in out of China. There'll be a picture here in a little bit of a cow with what I call a cadmium hump, but almost every mineral coming out of China has cadmium in it, and if you've got 100 cows and 3 of them have a slow hook hump from the shoulders back to the hook bones, that's a classic cadmium toxicity look. We can go on. So, do you currently have problems? Well, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Okay, most people have some problem some time of the year, and that's, I guess, the group that I would like to address today. We can go on. How much conditioner, how much sea salt? That's this friend of mine there in North Dakota. I'm going to tell a number of stories about him, but I met him 7.5 years ago down in Texas. He came down to Texas to hear a talk, and we've been phone and I've been to his place a number of times, and he's kind of a poster child for what to do. Anyway, we can go on. So start thinking for yourself. The beauty of this program, I'm going to give you some options where you could go to buy an already mixed mineral that is clean with nothing from China if you don't want to have to do your own thinking. But the beauty of the program that I want to talk about is you get to do your own thinking. The problem with this program is you have to do your own thinking. Okay, we can go on. So, herding knowledge, animal husbandry versus animal science. I don't want to dwell on this too long. Let's go to the next one. So Simon Sinek, any of you read the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek? Okay. So I thought, I'm not giving people a reason with which to listen to the next hour and a half. So next slide. I decided to put together some stories about some successes people had by using this 4-part harmony I want to talk about. A fellow, I've got a feed bag up here, but a fellow from Indiana was in Illinois in, I believe it was November of 2011, and he said, he was selling purebred Murray Grey. He said, 60 to 70% of my calves got pink eye last summer. So we talked about a number of different things, and finally taking Maynard Murray and Weston A. Price and Kerry Reams, some of these people that I had studied after I broke my right ankle, and I guess I have a couple of those books here. Fertility from the Ocean Deep by Charles Walters and Sea Energy Agriculture by Maynard Murray. A lot of what I want to talk about or will talk about came from those books. Anyway, I said, well, why don't we take sea salt and put it in some water, and we'll give this mineral water. At that time I called it brine. I wish I never would have, because people keep thinking salt when you say brine, when in actuality what we were trying to do is recreate seawater. Seawater and our blood are the same 92 minerals in almost the same balance. The only difference is, I think it's iron and magnesium are reversed. Maynard Murray, they took a dog, took 90% of the blood out and put seawater in, and the dog lived. So making this seawater out of sea ocean floor deposit, and I will get into how to do that. That was November. I called him the 1st of September the next year and said, well, how was the pink eye this year? And he said, not one case. And the only thing he did was he made mineral water, which would be very, very similar to our blood or to his cattle's blood. So when we do get to that, if you wanted to only do one thing that I'm going to talk about this afternoon, if you can figure out how to way to make this mineral water on your farm, you will spend less money and get more good out of that. I'm more into prevention than to try to fix the problem after the problem shows up. So I'm, as a lot of people think, well, I'm spending a lot of money year round to prevent pink eye in the summer and scours and pneumonia, or lice and pneumonia in the winter. Well, if you're back to this early slide, you're selling seed stock and your Highlanders are better than everyone else's, they'll bring more money. Now, all Highlanders are bringing quite a bit right now. Don't quite know what I want to say about that. But getting a clean, mineral-rich inter-unit environment really helps. A fellow called me January. He had some registered low lines that had some hoof and ankle problems, hairline here, and they'd almost go over on the front of their hoof, and then it was kind of all this snapping and popping, and nothing was making sense with the questions I was asking him. And I finally said, well, are you feeding any GMOs? Oh yeah, corn stalks last fall, Roundup Ready alfalfa. I said, you're just trying to make a sow's ear out of a silk purse. I couldn't shame him into not feeding the alfalfa. So I said, you need to feed 6 ounces of the Redmond conditioner per heifer per day until a month after you get through feeding that hay. I wanted to make sure we drew all of the Roundup out of those cattle. That date was going to be approximately 3.5 months later when he would get to that point. He called me in 3 weeks and said, the symptoms are all gone. God knew we were going to create Roundup, and he gave us the antidote down there in Redmond, Utah. So back to Rock Thompson, the fellow that their quote was earlier, Northwest South Dakota. When he was down there in Texas, his nephew, his cattle were just getting eaten up by lice there in Northwest South Dakota. And so he did the 6 ounces of conditioner per cow per day, and each day he went out there's like, this isn't working, they're still scratching, but he just kept doing it. And on the 5th day when he went out, the cattle had stopped scratching. The conditioner raises pH. Animals that are alkaline have resistance to internal, external parasites, lice, flies. Anyway, in that, he was very happy about that. So this bull here on the right, I'd been going to this farm in New York for about 4 years, and I could never talk them into adding an enticer. If you want to feed Redmond conditioner, you're going to have to find something the cattle like. When I was trying to describe this one spring in Missouri, I said, I want your cattle eating 2 ounces of ground corn a day, but they're going to want more than that. So we need to find something really bitter to put into it. Let's try adding 4 ounces of conditioner, and maybe you can slow them down on the corn. I was trying to come at it backwards because people were not hearing you would have to have an enticer. If your grass finisher sugar works really well. It took me a while to get around feeding sugar to my cows. It does not work the same way in a cow as it does in a human being. I'll probably talk about Steve Swerzik in Nebraska, and he'd been doing it for 20 years with the sugar, and he had 16, 18-year-old cows. Excuse me. So Steve's, so this Happy Lines deal, they wouldn't entice the conditioner but they were feeding baleage, which was wet. I was there in March. I said, well, you've got 70 cows in that pasture. Let's put 280 ounces of conditioner on top of this hay. If they want to eat hay, they're going to ingest conditioner. I was back about 2.5 months later, and for the first time ever, you see the lines running parallel to the ground. It looks like he just drug his fingers across there and made those little welts appear. Happy lines showed up, and they showed up on at least half of the cattle. The next year, those 3 would probably been 7 or 8. They finally got their animals mineralized, well, cleaned up. They had them mineralized, but they didn't have them cleaned up. The meat to bone ratio, so we've got a 700-pound carcass there, 60%, 420 pounds of meat. 70%, 490 pounds of meat coming off the same 700 pounds. This is a big deal. They improved it simply by adding conditioner, and then those calves in utero at mom's side, they grew up, they gained faster, and they put on more muscle. Anyway, AI conception in Canada, I mentioned Steve Swerzik. His brother Tom was a vet at the University of Kentucky for 47 years. He's the one that did the autopsy on Secretariat. He was called up to Canada to a dairy, 3,000 head dairy, that their complaint was 35% first service AI. So they sampled all the feed and stuff and said, well, these 3 things you shouldn't be feeding, and you need 8 to 10 ounces of conditioner a day. No, 10, 12 ounces of conditioner a day, and 10 or 12 ounces of the sea salt per head per day. So they split the herd in 2. They got 1,500 dairy cows. They're still feeding their old way. They've got 1,500 more that they're trying this 10, 12 ounces of each. In 60 days' time, they were at 70% first service AI and 2 more liters of milk per dairy cow per day. Well, they quit the experiment, and now everybody's on the elevated or maybe on the correct amount of conditioner and sea salt. Back to Rock Thompson there in northwest South Dakota a couple years ago, 1st or 2nd of August, I got there, but he'd gone out in the morning and checked his cattle and everything was fine. He did not have a fly problem. I got there about 30 minutes before he got home from Belle Fourche. They'd gone shopping for the day. His son and I unloaded some stuff, and Rock got home, and we're talking, and he's looking over my shoulder, and I'm, what are you looking at? And he said, well, I think those cattle are in the wrong pasture. So we went out in his white pickup, and it almost turned black because of the number of flies, but they'd broken the fence down, and I have never seen a herd of cattle in so much distress in my life. And I mean, I think he had 270 pair. If he had just weaned them yesterday and we were trying to have this conversation, that would have been quiet compared to what these cattle were doing. Well, I said, we need to get them alkaline as soon as we possibly can. So we took, oops, should be one more. Don't have a big enough something here. Oh, this is MS Crystals. It's a pretty good clean sugar if you're doing that. If you don't worry about grain, cracked corn, soybean meal, other things. Wrong bag. So what we did is he had some feeders that were probably about the length and maybe slightly wider than these tables, and we set them up so it would be like one in that corner, this corner, or that corner, so that there wouldn't be competition around any of them. 270 head, we needed a lot of rim space. If you're going to try to do this program where they're consuming 8 or 10 ounces of this stuff a day, you're going to need more rim space than if you're only feeding 2 ounces of some mixed mineral a day. Anyway, we put a 50-pound bag of bicarb, a 50-pound bag of conditioner. He had some pretty good dry molasses. You can't get the one that he was using anymore, and I've kind of stopped promoting dry molasses because it's 38 or 42 or 45, which means it's 38% molasses, and 62% some other junk. A lot of times it's grain byproducts, DDG. Anyway, and then, oh, thanks. Lost my thought there. Oh, over the course of the next 2 days, they ate 7 ounces of each of these each day per pair. So they ate almost a pound of each in the course of 2 days. Well, sodium bicarb, its base. Conditioner, it raises pH, binds the neighbor's toxins, has a bunch of minerals, and promotes the growth of the biology in the gut. 36 hours after we put all this stuff out there, the flies left his cows, went right over the fence to the neighbor's yearlings who are now running with their tails in the air. It wasn't the flies were just moving through. His cows got alkaline so quickly they were no longer a good house for bugs, and they just moved over to the neighbor. Well, and why did they go to his cows before the neighbor's yearlings? The cows were working harder than the steers were. So they were more susceptible in the same environment. And next year's calf crop, this is kind of the leap of faith. If you get a clean, mineral-rich inter-unit environment, you know, we're preventing pink eye, scours, pneumonia, lice, that sort of thing. But next year's calf crop, you get better calves on the ground than you were getting this year. Hey, so Montana did a study with Redmond and ADG. I don't know, Carson, do you know how many ounces they were consuming on average in this study? 2 to 3 ounces, okay. In most situations, unless you're in a wreck, Steve Campbell says your cows need 5 or 6 ounces of sea salt a day. They need, on the front end, 3 or 4 ounces of the conditioner to get cleaned up from the neighbor's toxins, and then after that, 2 to 3 for 9 months out of the year. Conditioner, 9 months out of the year. It promotes growth. If you're feeding the conditioner the last month of pregnancy and your cows are already somewhat fat, you could be creating large calves. It would be like feeding alfalfa to first calf heifers before you started pulling calves, okay? If your cows aren't that heavy, you can keep feeding it. They need it. But if your cows are already heavy, you can get in trouble there. Anyway, you probably saw that. The space between my own ears, so hopefully today I'm giving you some ammunition to go home and do your own thinking rather than buy something from another seed salesman. So the best book that I know that each of you should be reading about how epigenetics works, it's written for human beings, but it works the same way in cattle, is Pottinger's Prophecy. It was written 12, 13 years ago by 3 different authors describing what had happened in the preceding 70 years that Pottinger was trying to tell us happened with those cats and how that played out in the human population. Well, I was reading a different book called Epigenetic Revolution, which is a much harder read. I suggest Pottinger's Prophecy. But this Waddington's Epigenetic Landscape, we've put the cattle inside of a fence. They can't go 5 miles to get clay or salt lick or whatever. So if we don't provide what they need, the ball's going to roll down the left side. The earlier in life we do the right thing, if we get them mineralized before the cow gets pregnant. Western Price was the second book I read after I broke my ankle. Nourishment and Physical Degeneration is his big book. My favorite story out of that book was he was in Peru, probably at 12,000 feet in a village, and he'd been there for a week or 10 days, and all of a sudden there's this commotion. And he's like, well, what's going on? Well, such and such a grandma is coming home. Well, where's she been? Down to the ocean. Well, what was she doing? catching fish and drying the eggs. Why was she doing that? So that her granddaughters could have perfect babies. We were going to get these dried fish eggs into the female before she ever got pregnant. The farther up that landscape, we get the clean and mineral-rich intrauterine environment going on before she ever gets pregnant. You're going to start expressing the cattle that you own, the genetics of the cattle you already own. We have mined the minerals out. We've got all these toxins coming in, which are just a backpack. It'd be like me trying to give this talk wearing a 50-pound pack. I'd be a lot more tired at the end of the talk than if I don't have that toxic backpack. Anyway, point of conception, there was a fellow off the east end of Lake Erie who had about 45 purebred cattle, and I was there about a month before he was going to calve. They're still eating around a round bale feeder. And so each year he was having 20 to 25 heifers that he was putting back into his herd. Well, in his 11-month-old heifers, we're not quite to calving date yet, he had 1 or 2 heifers I thought were good enough phenotypically and glandularly, early shedding in your environment. The animal that's screaming, I love Oklahoma, South Dakota, or wherever it is you might live, that early shedding, shiny hair coat, the hardest thing to find. Anyway, he had 1 or 2 out of that group. In the 23-month-old, he had 3 or 4, but in the 35-month-old getting ready to have their first calf, he could never get them developed before, well, to breed at 1 and calve at 2. He always had to calve at 3. He had 13 or 14 that were the right kind, and I'm noticing this and told him about it. And I said, well, you know, what happened? Did you change your mineral, different bulls? Back to the Sherlock Holmes kind of thing. Finally, I said, well, did you either have a really dry or a really cold winter? And he goes, oh, we had a bad winter here a few years ago. Well, when was it? So he gets his phone out. The winter that those coming 3-year-olds were in utero, I mean, normally there it rains and we've got mud, and then it snows and melts and it's mud, and rains or it snows and there's just mud all winter. The year that those coming 3-year-olds just getting ready to calve, it had gotten 12, 15 degrees colder in the fall, and it just stayed cold all winter. So these cows, well, those 3-year-olds were now in utero, were either on frozen ground or frozen snow. He changed the epigenetics, or God changed the epigenetics, and he finally was expressing the genetics that he owned. And I said, you're either going to have to move or make some artificial deal where those cows aren't in the mud all winter long if you ever want to be able to sell your genetics. Well, I don't think anybody in here probably has anything quite as dramatic, but maybe don't raise your hand if you've got a really, really bad story. Anyway, and then how late do we wean? And that's a whole thing about developing villi in the rumen. That's another talk. But typically, if you wean early, you set them up for failure. And when I mean early, if you don't wean in sync with nature, if a cow's pregnant, she's going to wean that calf 4 to 6 weeks before she has her next one. She's going to do it herself. So we have everybody talking about late weaning. No, that's weaning in sync with nature in my mind. So if we don't have Gabe Brown type fertility, anybody in here, has everybody in here heard of Gabe Brown, watched Gabe Brown? Does anybody have his kind of soil? We're not there yet. You know, you want to do cover crops, you want to rotate cattle. Sooner or later, you can get there and you won't need anything I'm about to talk about. Gabe doesn't use anything. He gets it all through the grass. The minerals. In the mineral feeder, 2 things. if an animal's acid, they don't digest or store near as many of the minerals as if they're alkaline. But putting it in a mineral box, they're about 20% on average bioavailable. If they're attached to a carbon atom through the grass, they're 90% bioavailable. Back to, I wanted to see a cow getting 5 or 6 ounces of sea salt per head per day. As long as you give an animal the minimum amount of every mineral it needs, they're just going to excrete the excess. So 6 ounces of Redmond salt is probably going to give you all the selenium you need in your environment, all the iodine you need in your environment, all the zinc. So all the excess is going out on your grass, which is just better grass next year. And instead of 20% bioavailable, they're 90% bioavailable next year. So rotationally grazing, having your cows be your fertilizer cart works good. So Maynard Murray, I've just talked about him putting the sea minerals back in. He was seeing that his elderly patients who had predominantly eaten ocean-based protein had fewer aches, pains, diseases than those who'd been eating land-based protein. So he went to the Atlantic and autopsied everything he could get his hands on. And what he found was that he couldn't find any degenerative disease. So he started bringing sea salt and sea water back to the land. And over the course of 20 years, he was able to recreate that immunity to disease that he'd found in the ocean in both plants and animals. Number of stories in there, but one is he took pigs, ocean-grown grains, they didn't root. Feed them the conventional grains, they'd go back to rooting. 2 weeks later, he'd go back to ocean-grown, they'd quit rooting. So if the minerals were in their food, they didn't have to look for it in the ground. So the conditioner for the detox. And Carson can probably describe that better than I, but it is a member of the zeolite family. It's a montmorillonite sodium bentonite, yes, clay that is very effective at binding toxins. So in the book that Neil Bossart from Redmond wrote, they took some of the clay. So this is finer screened than the conditioner. In there's a lady about 75. She's wanting to pull toxins out of her feet, so she takes maybe this much of the clay, puts it in a Rubbermaid tub with as warm a water as she can stand. Well, in the 15 or 20 minutes it took for the water to cool off, she must have forgotten what she was doing, because being frugal, she didn't want to throw it away. She watered her house plants and killed every plant in her house. She'd pulled so many toxins out of her feet in 15, 20 minutes time. So if you do that, then throw the water out in the driveway where you don't want the weeds to grow. If you want to do it from the inside out, you can ingest this, but not the stuff that you'd already pulled. And it's very effective. And there's quite a list in there. Personal experience along that line. I was at a conference and I called a friend about, early in the morning, and how you doing? Her daughter. She said, Christina's been up all night, coming out both ends. I've changed the bed sheets 3 times. She didn't have the clay, she had the conditioner. I said, give her a half a teaspoon of the conditioner. I called her 12 hours later and I go, how'd it go? And she said, she fell asleep in 10 minutes and slept for 11 straight hours. I have Redmond conditioner in the truck, in my briefcase, in the house. It's really good. So Tom, on your thumb drive, there is a book, We Eat Clay and Wear It Too. You can put it on the website or email that out to everybody. It's how to use it for humans, all right? Natural soda. I like the stuff out of Rifle, Colorado. There's another one in Wyoming, Genesis. Can't think there's Solvay, S-O-L-V-A-Y. Well, those 3 mines are maybe a distance of approximately 70 miles north in a straight north-south line. They're in northwestern Canada, Colorado, and southwestern Wyoming. And if you ever get a bag of this natural soda and you taste it, and then you taste the Arm & Hammer, I guarantee you will throw the Arm & Hammer away and this is all you'll use in the house. But you bought it for your cows, and it really works. And then if you don't have that red Solo cup-shaped cow with a great big rumen who can digest more of everything she ingests, and you have very low bricks, very coarse grasses, apple cider vinegar. So I happen to live 3 miles from Golden Valley Vinegar. For 15 years, they were the supplier to Bragg until Patricia sold out. Roger told me the first year that he supplied her, she needed 100,000 gallons. By the time they'd quit, 15, 16 years later, the last order she had was 4.5 million gallons. He'd hired a guy, all he did for 10 years, 50 weeks a year, was weld up stainless steel stuff. When Roger met Patricia, he had 8 50,000 gallon tanks. Now there are 72 there. Well, when Bragg sold to the bean counters, Roger started bottling his own. He doesn't water it down, but the big differentiator, all vinegar is, even though it's acid, it's alkaline forming in the body. So whether you're buying Manzana, which is supplying Bragg now, or Fleischmann's, the apple juice concentrate vinegars, the only place to get enzymes. All vinegar has mother, but the enzymes are what digest the feed. The only place to get enzymes is from the parts of the apple that they add, the peel and the core, where Roger uses whole apples. Well, people who keep track, there's a 20% reduction or more in feed costs by feeding the whole apple. So the farther away from the Solo cup, the cow's head's over here. If your cows are the reverse wedge, that's the first one to sell. But the more grass efficient type cows you've got, and the better your grass, the less you would need the vinegar or any of these things. The better your grass, Gabe Brown, there we go. So we've got to shut off the garden hose of dirty minerals. 95+% of all the mixed minerals use individual ingredients out of China. And the way you would know you had that, whether it was through a mixed mineral or a fertilizer you might have used on your place, or a fertilizer someone else might have used growing the hay that you bought to bring home. If you see that slow hump in the back from the shoulders back to the hook bones, that's a classic cadmium toxicity. Be a picture of that in in the future. So I was just trying to come up with something that made me think about mineral mixing companies and what our mind came up with that a cow should have. Well, then you get into what kind of cows are you working with, the feedlot type cattle that are on a mono culture crop or whatever. Anyway, just something that I heard when I was young and reminded me of it. So I want someone else to figure out how to do this, and I don't know why that's coming up the way it is. You don't want to have to do the things I'm about to tell you here in the next hour or so. Well, there are good places to get that done, nothing from China. Will Winter has something called Craftsman Gold. Will and I have known each other for, 15, 16 years. He's been very diligent about nothing from China, and it's a pretty well thought out mineral. Jeff Maddox at Fertrell's has a very clean mineral. This Custom Feeds is there in Nebraska near where Steve Swerzik lives, and Steve's got enough cows that which reminds me of another story, that he just has Custom Feeds mix up this 531 mix, EX. I called them here probably a month ago and said, most places there's not enough enticer in this mix, and the mix is sea salt, conditioner, and sodium bicarb. Okay, there's not enough enticer to get enough ounces to get to that, for that to be the whole entire mineral program. People aren't getting enough consumption, so they have one with more enticer in it. It's called EX. And then vitamin A, D, E. If you get the ringworm, some people call it, around the eyes late in the winter, you're missing vitamin A and D. Fill there. And then Case Blom is, where is he at from Campbell, Margene? Where's Case at? Platt? Okay. He does the most thoughtful, clean mineral. He'll want, one, the history of what's been going on, and want a forage analysis, and then he'll mix something up, but it's not inexpensive, all right? But he might zero in on your issues more than anyone else. Back to Steve Swerzik and that 531 mix. I called him on the 17th of January one year, and Steve, what's going on? And he said, well, I just weaned 750 calves on the 17th of December, and Christmas morning we had a 2-inch freezing rain. I'm telling this to a vet friend, and he goes, oh, I hear the wreck coming. And I go, no, Dick, as of the 17th of January, he had still not had one sick calf. So we're not even through the sweat and a 2-inch freezing rain. He was feeding 10 ounces of sea salt per 575 pound wean calf per day for 30 days in a row. And he was getting so many minerals in there that they were just excreting what they didn't need, and they stayed healthy through foul weather, everything else. Yeah, the 531EX with vitamin A, D, E. There are 800 ounces in a 50-pound bag. That should last 80 cows one day. That's kind of a target. Now, not every zip code is the same. I'm kind of giving you a blanket deal. Hopefully there's enough in there for some safety. Is there anyone in here who feeds Free Choice Enterprise or ABC or Helfter? Okay, so on the thumb drive, there is a Word document called Rebel Base Free Choice, or a mineral program, and I was at a place where they were feeding that Free Choice, and the kids were into Star Wars, and where they kept all the minerals was another building, and the kids called that Rebel Base instead of the house. Anyway, so we just named it to make the kids happy. But that is a way you could create your own, and making sure there's nothing from China in there, because I don't think they're working as well as they used to when, what was his name? That'll come to me here in about 10 minutes and I'll say it. Okay. So stop feeding that mix 30 days before calving starts if your cows are fat, because the conditioner is in there, and conditioner promotes growth. If things are good, your cows are going to gain better. But if you don't want to be pulling calves, and I'm not saying you're absolutely going to, but in the interest of caution, I'm going to tell you to stop feeding it 30 days before calving starts, and then start in again after, in earnest, to try to get your cows cleaned up for breeding. Ellen Bench is a homeopathist from Stevensville, Montana. She's got stuff that works. If you find yourself in a jackpot and you want a way out that's natural, this Ellen Bench really knows what's going on. If you do not want to have to vaccinate your animals for anything, this Ellen Bench can help you figure out a program. She's got homeopathic treatments. It comes in a little case to pull vaccines out of children that they got in their childhood stuff. If you believe in that sort of stuff, that of all the homeopathists, if that's a word, that I know, she's the best, especially on the livestock side, but on the human side as well. So you can do it after disease shows up, but I think I said earlier, I'm a prevention guy more than let's fix it. Let's wait until we have a problem and then try to fix it. Because you're never going to completely express the genetics you own if you're not working on it 365 days a year. All right? So I can do this myself. Most of you can. Anybody in here have over 200 cows? Anybody in here have over 100 cows? Okay. If you have 100 cows in a town job, you may need one of these mixed situations. You've only got time to go out there before work and after work. The rest of us, all it does is gives us more time out with our cattle, more eyes to the acre, so to speak, time spent in the pasture. Can you source these ingredients? I mentioned this Steve Swerzik in Nebraska. Who here lives in a state contiguous to Nebraska? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, Steve Swerzik there in Cedar Rapids, Nebraska. He handles all the stuff I'm going to talk about. But there are other places that also handle all of these products. Carson's can tell you where on the Redmond site you go to enter your zip code, and it'll tell you, am I speaking wrong here, Carson, where you can find Redmond products near you. All right? All you got to do is type in your zip code. Rim space, I mentioned that earlier. Epigenetics, air, water, grass, mineral, handling, weather, all of those things come into play. The earth will grow old like a garment. So in Weston Price's book, when white man moved to new ground here in the U.S., you could get 40 to 50 good crops or 80 to 100 average crops before the minerals would play out. If you're hauling them off, well, this reminds me of another story. How much time do I have? I was at a place that had been homesteaded 160 years earlier in western Wyoming, and the last thing they showed us before we had lunch and then left was the garden spots. And so I was with a couple that was out putting it on, and about the third table back here, away from the lady that was describing what was going on, but all the broadleaf plants, it looked like somebody had taken a shotgun and it was just shredded with holes. And I'm telling my friends, the bugs are having a heyday. There's no minerals left in the soil. So we walk about 75 yards and wind up 20 yards away from this garden plot with the same things planted in there and hardly a hole in those exact same plants. So when she got through telling her stuff, I raised my hand and said, what's the difference between the first plot you showed us and this one? She said, well, that was the original garden plot. We'd been taking minerals away for 160 years. Yeah, they were trying to compost and do all that, but the minerals were slowly leaving the ground. She wasn't saying all that. I'm thinking this. Anyway, where we were standing in this other plot had been a pasture up until last year. The minerals were cycling through the cattle. So the earth will grow old. So acid versus alkaline. If we've got mineral rich, low toxins, low stress, we're talking Gabe Brown. We don't need any of this stuff, but most of us find ourselves in this low minerals because it was farm ground we're trying to reclaim, or somebody's been grazing cattle there for 150 years. And high toxins. That's a problem that we have to address, and the best one to use is the Redmond conditioner. So if number 2, which most of us find our way in, baking soda, conditioner, apple cider, sea salt. Those are just kind of a general thing, and I left Tom a copy of this PowerPoint, and I would imagine he would share it with anybody here that wants it. Oops, somebody was taking a picture. Okay. So this is prevention, and that's the space I like to be in. But there's going to be a problem. We can see a wreck coming, that the flies and the lice. What can I do? Well, baking soda and the conditioner. But if we're already in the middle of a wreck, because the conditioner promotes growth, we may want to just up the sea salt and up the baking soda until we get past the problem, and then you can add the conditioner back in. I think we've gone there. Number 4 there, express the genetics. That's kind of a leap of faith. I don't know if we have audio for this, and if we don't, I'll just go on. No. Okay, so this lady's name, Courtney Griffin's title of the talk is Epigenetics. It's on YouTube. I highly recommend you watch the whole thing. And she, as you didn't find out, she was talking about these agouti mice, and when they changed what they ate, agouti mice, normally yellow, fat, cancer, when they changed what the mouse ate while the mice were in utero, then she gets brown, skinny mice out of this agouti mother. Well, wait a minute, I thought she was always supposed to have fat. No, we can change the Peruvian grandmother. We can change how the calves turn out by getting a clean, mineral-rich inter-uterine environment. The best book to kind of understand that is this Pottinger's Prophecy. Before the bull and the cow got together, it takes 120 days to change out all the red blood cells. So that would be the minimum amount of time to get up the first step of the ladder of better health in your herd. But the mineral water can help in a hurry. So I just listed things that were problems. You probably have others you could add to the list, or, I've never had any of these problems. If there's anyone in here who doesn't have any problems in your herd, there is no reason to change what you're doing with your herd of cattle right now on the mineral side. Most places I go, whether I'm doing a school or I go to Angus's ranch sometime in Scotland, usually you find some issues and how do we address what's going on. So Maynard Murray, I like this picture, don't want to beat this up too much. It's the same rock, but we changed the environment. Look how much more life we have, where the environment is more animal and plant friendly, okay? And did we run out of, I need someone to start doing advancing a slide. May I impose on you to move up there and advance slides? I don't think I turned it off. Nope. Just go to the next slide if you would. The arrow to the right. Okay, so, and then do it one more time. You know, we were told in the Bible after we ate of that apple what was going to happen. So you see up until about 1928, the minerals were holding out pretty good. But then we stopped using mules and horses and whatnot, Highlands for draft, and we started using steam, gas, diesel. I found out 3 or 4 winters ago that compaction is about 1/3 the weight of the piece of equipment on the ground, but 2/3 was how fast the plow was going through the ground, crushing the pore spaces where the biology lived. That seemed to be the reason that we really started losing that. Go ahead and hit the okay. So at that point, things started going down. Well, okay, we're not getting our corn that used to be this big. It's now this big. Oh, we've got nitrogen. We can make that grow bigger by adding nitrogen. Well, the other one was hybrid corn. We take these 2 varieties of corn and put them together, and now we've got corn that can be this big on mineral depleted soil, and then we're going to eat mineral depleted corn and wondering why we're getting sick from eating mineral depleted plants. Well, similarly, crossbred animals need fewer minerals than purebred animals. typically live 1 year longer and give you one more calf. You can hit the slide. So as things went down, hey, we don't have those minerals in there anymore. Now it's a bug's heyday. Bugs are animal or Mother Nature's cleaning crew out there eating what's not fit for man or beast. No problem. We've got these chemical warfare agents. We can kill those off, and then we add in glyphosate and GMO. We can go on. So we're eating these mineral deficient foods, but we're eating the best of the bad stuff. The worst of the bad stuff's going to the livestock. We can go on. Ian Mitchell Innes talks about moving fast as the grass is growing fast and slowing down as the grass slows down. I don't know if you've ever been to that, but back to Tom. On the thumb drive, you can ask him to share it with you. There's Ian's slides and the notes that I took from 2 times of seeing Ian. He's worth listening to. I think on YouTube there's a 7 or a 9-part series where he was on one farm and he is kind of going through his program. If you want to watch or listen to that while you're out working, you don't have to see it, you just listen to it. We can go on. So Weston Price was a dentist at the turn of the last century, and he was seeing so much facial deformity and cavities, he thought it must be something in the diet, in the environment, that's causing this. And it was about the time airplanes were possible. So he went around the world, found 15 groups of people eating in the old way, nothing modern Western process. It was how they grew and prepared their food. A lot of that was fermentation. There was no rhyme or reason to the amount of fat, protein, carbohydrate. Minimum fat, 30. Eskimos, 80% fat. They were all in perfect health. The common denominator in the 1930s was that those groups were getting 5 to 10 times the vitamins and minerals the average American was getting in the 1930s, and we do not get half of that today. We can go on. So if you don't have that, if you're having problems, different kind of cows that you might have, home field advantage. I brought Fred Provenz's book, Nourishment, here. I guess I would suggest this one right after Pottinger's Prophecy to kind of understand animals and how they're telling us their innate nature goes and finds different things for their health and how we could apply that to ourselves. The longer your animals have been clean and mineral rich, the better your offspring will be. We can go on. And there's plenty of time tomorrow in the Q&A for questions. I'm sorry, I'm going kind of fast. So 6 ounces of sea salt a day. I just have a list of enticers there: expelled soybean meal, finely ground corn flour, bread. People are doing these different things, but that last line there, flour, bread, cottonseed meal, there's not a lot of that. The main ones: sugar, expelled, finely ground, and then the excess, the part she doesn't need, is just better fertility next year. We can go on. So if you or the previous owners to your ground have been using potassium chloride, NPK, the sodium level in the ground is really high, and it's hard to get the cattle to consume enough sea salt. This is where, in a minute, the mineral water will really come in. Go ahead. Oops. Spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. We can go on. So different sea salts, the Redmond, they're human grade, Himalayan pink salt, C90, independent salt. Click it again. So sea salt should have some color to it. So this one on the left doesn't have any color. It's very aptly named Badia sea salt. We can click it again. And so to keep Morton salt pouring when it rained, they were adding aluminum. Each molecule of aluminum ties up 3 molecules of this iodized salt. So they were cross purposes with what they were using for an anti-caking agent. Let's go back. So the independent salt company there in the top right-hand corner, they use yellow prussiate of soda, unless you specifically ask for no treat. Yellow prussiate of soda is a form of cyanide. You can click it twice. So a picture of 20% bioavailable dry, 50% the mineral water I'm going to do here in a second, or in the grass. Let's click it 2 or 3 times here. So 20% from the dry, go ahead and click it. Okay, click it again. We've got 50 to 60 on the, click it, on using the mineral water, which I'm going to get into, or click it again. If we were to put this on dry or foliar, 5 pounds of sea salt, foliar every 50 to 60 days is amazingly good. Put it on 2 days to 2 weeks before the cattle are going to get in there to graze. We can click it again and again. Enough quantity. Okay, let's go on. So as I said earlier, what do I want to say? Right after World War II, the American Navy went around the world, multiple samples of all the salt water around the world, and they found it's always these same 92 minerals in exactly this balance. Okay? At the equator, there's more minerals in warm water. No. Yeah. And there's fewer minerals, still the same balance both places, in the ocean water at Sitka, Alaska, because it's cold. All right? So if you're making this mineral water in the summer and the water's hot, it's more mineral rich. And you may need more in the bag, as you'll find out in a minute. We can go on. So it takes 120 days again. Click it. So if we don't have enough minerals coming in, we'll steal them wherever we can. Bones, organs, and when we're out, disease sets in, we can go on. So cost and quality, I know of no better way to get the minerals in than this mineral water. Go ahead. So if you have a stock tank, I used to explain 3 or 4 different ways to do this, but now I'm down in a group, I do one, because people were taking part of A and part of B and part of C and it wasn't working. If you want to do it a different way, catch me at the booth or tomorrow at the Q&A. If you've got a stock tank, if it's not metal, and if it's on a float, on Monday, you put some sea salt in your woven polypropylene tea bag. 600 count pillowcase is too fine. Gunny sack is too coarse. And if this is a stock tank and the water's coming in down there, I don't want to stir up the ocean floor that I put in here. What's the ocean floor? The excess minerals and the out of balance minerals that were flowing out of the mouth of the Columbia or the Mississippi or the Nile or the Amazon. I don't want to stir up that ocean floor. So I want to find the calmest part of this stock tank. The whole stage here is my stock tank. And I put this in on Monday morning. Tuesday morning, instead of losing it down there, I'm going to throw it this way, but I don't throw it in the tank. I grab it, and at some point, I'm starting to get the weight of it. I jerk it out of the water, trying to leave the least amount of cloud possible. The cloud is out of balance minerals. So then this is all drained out on the ground. When I go to test it, was half the sea salt I put in there Monday still there? I put in too much sea salt. Was there nothing left but mush? I didn't put in enough sea salt. Is there a fist size amount of unused sea salt, grains of sea salt? I got it just right. So I adjust, and on Wednesday morning I put it in again. Thursday morning I jerk it out of there and recheck myself. So Monday is mineral water, Tuesday's fresh water, Wednesday's mineral water, Thursday's fresh water, Friday mineral water, Saturday's fresh, Sunday we went to church, and we start over on Monday. It's the easiest way to keep track of it. is this my Sunday week or is this my Monday week? Just go to church on Sunday and go back. Okay, that is the easiest way to do it. I used to explain it a bunch of different ways. Does anybody need me to go through that again? The float is down there. I found the most calm part of the tank because I don't want to stir up the ocean floor. And cattle come in. If you've got 100 cows, a 300-gallon tank would be just right. If you had 100 cows, a 50-gallon tank, it's not big enough, one, to get away from the water coming in, but you don't have enough time to get back to balance. It takes about 3 hours to reach homeostasis. If you had 10 cows and a 1,000-gallon tank, it wouldn't be active enough. So about 3 gallons per cow. You've got 33 cows, a 100-gallon tank would be fine. You've got 20 cows, that still works. You've got 50 cows, we're getting marginal on tank size. Anyway, water's coming in there, trying to leave the least amount of cloud. Okay, we can go on. Throwing away 10%, I used to say that. Don't be stingy. It's okay to throw a little away. It doesn't cost too much. We can go on. So a fellow from Wyoming, he wrote this. There was a thread on a blog about, oh, this has cost so much money and everything else. And I'm just letting you read these. Let's click it again. So, oh, we can't hear this. So if you go online, YouTube, mineral water, Steve Campbell. We're setting up a second stock tank where he's using mineral water every day. Okay? I wish that I had used the words out of balance instead of the word imbalanced, which sounds too much like in balance. Otherwise, I was really specific about how I was saying it. Okay? We can go on. Just again. So animals that are alkaline digest and store more of the minerals they're ingesting. Animals that are acid, a lot of those minerals are just going right straight through them. So getting them alkaline. Bicarb, well, that's a Band-Aid. We've got a problem. Why are they keep going acid? But we can get them alkaline, but we're missing something. You know, you need to be a little Sherlock Holmes about it. I like where you feed these all separate for a while because you will learn more about your cows if you feed them separately. A fellow in eastern Nebraska found that he had to feed 7 ounces or more of the conditioner every day, or he just had sick cattle. Well, he had corn and soybeans all the way around him. That water drained off and through him. Cattle were drinking that water until he got to 7 ounces of conditioner a day or more. He couldn't help them. We can go on. Still portion of the tank, 3 gallons, least. Okay, we already did that. We can go on. So that water in that mineral on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is only 3.5% sodium chloride, and the other 90 minerals in nature's balance. The closest thing to our blood or their blood that I can think of. The reason that it works so well is, one, it's imbalanced, but two, they don't have to get past the yuck factor of all that sodium chloride. You don't need any enticer. A fellow in Texas who had some cattle that were really in trouble, we made mineral water, and he said for the first 6 months, his cattle consumed 75 to 80% mineral water. But boy, did they get healthy. Cattle were, it was about a month before calving. He's feeding them up on the hill. They came down a laneway, and let's just say their regular water is the back wall down there or the other end of this hallway. Well, we made mineral water in a second tank here, so it's fresh and mineral water. And it's a brand new tank, and it's on a concrete slab, and it's the first water they get to when they come off of that hay. Well, he called me up in a week and he said, they hardly ever go down to the fresh water. And he said he was concerned, and I said, well, maybe there's a flavor, a taste, a smell in that old tank that's not in this one. Why don't you take your tea bag out of this one and put it in that one? He called me up the next day and he said, well, that took them 30 minutes to figure out. Now they walk by the fresh water and they stand in line down there to get the mineral water. And for 6 months, 75 to 80% of all the water they drank was mineral water. I haven't seen a place yet where on the front end they didn't drink at least 50% mineral water. So that's why I have this every other day. But you have to have fresh water somewhere, sometime in the system, okay? There was a guy in Oklahoma, he couldn't get to his cattle that often. So he had it in for 2 days and out for 3, and he's elated. When Murray died, the family just took all the information and nobody has his research. So you can run your own tests, but watch the disposition of your cattle to make sure they're either happy, or if they're not happy, they're wringing their tails and bunching up. You may want to stop whatever it is that you were doing, because you may have just created a problem instead of solved one. My business cards are out there. I want this to be a success. If you get home and it isn't working like I suggested, call me. Well, what are you doing? And somebody's describing it, and I said, hang on a second. We got it wrong right there. I'm going to go back up about 3 steps. Try doing it this way. You know, when he calls up in 3 days, oh, that fixed the problem. So if I'm not clear about how to make this mineral water, or that amount of conditioner doesn't seem to be getting my cows to shed, or call me. That's what I do. We can go on. And I actually will take questions if you want right now. We're about to get into something else here. Yes, sir.
What is shedding?
What is shedding? Well, getting rid of the winter hair coat. The ones that shed the earliest are probably the ones that are going to breed the earliest. The ones that shed the earliest are most likely the ones that, when it gets colder, are going to start putting on a winter hair coat. They're more in tune with their environment, so when it starts to warm, they shed right away. It's like, oh, heat's coming. Oh, it's getting cold. I need to, if I put more winter hair on earlier, I don't lose as much back fat as the late ones. If you're putting the bulls in and you still have cows that haven't shed, heifers that haven't shed, I would be writing their number down, because they're just going to probably cause you some sort of angst sooner or later in the herd. Okay? They're less adapted to your zip code, those ones that are shedding later. Now, you can help them shed with the stuff we're talking about, but that was a good question. On the website, Tailor Made Cattle, it's on the business card. There's be it something at the end. There's a videos tab, and there's 9 or 10 videos describing this, describing the red solo cup cow, what do I look for in a bull, all those sorts of things. If you want to listen to something driving down the road, we can go on. So the conditioner on the soil, bind the toxins that somebody else either left there and you bought their farm ground, and we don't want those coming up in our grass, or something that blew in and fell down on the ground. You can use it that way. In stock ponds, for each acre of stock pond you've got, if you would put 100 pounds of conditioner, just walk around the outside throwing it in 3 times a year-ish, that you'll bind the toxins that are in that water. They'll just fall to the bottom. You'll get colloidal minerals, and the conditioner helps actually keep the water a little cooler in the heat of the summer. In the fresh stock tank, so if anybody's on city water, chlorine, fluorine, it'll bind that in the fresh water. If you're on city water and you're making mineral water, that will all drop to the bottom. One time I was at a conference with Aaron Elison from Redmond, and Aaron said, well, you've got to start with clean water. And I said, well, no, you don't, Aaron. You could have high arsenic. If you put enough sea salt, it'll just drive all the excess arsenic to the bottom of the stock tank. So it doesn't have to be real clean. And then in the mineral box, and in the mineral box, you will need enticer. We can go on. So how close is danger? The closer you live to danger, the more of the conditioner you're going to need to run on an ongoing basis. We can go on. Here's the cow. Click it one more time. The cadmium hump. Click it one more time. You see the hump in her back? That is a classic cadmium toxicity look. And usually it's through mineral, but it doesn't have to be. It can be through fertilizer you might have used on your ground, or fertilizer somebody else used on the hay that you bought. We can go on. Conditioner and calcium will help pull that out. We've introduced all these unique substances. Drugs just have effects. They don't have side effects. They just have effects. Redmond, I talk about the conditioner. It takes 500 straws to break the camel's back. Redmond conditioner is going to get rid of the first 400 or 450. So the immune system is not spinning in the mud. When along comes something big, it's already busy. You get rid of a lot. So most of the time it's just sitting there relaxing, taking a sauna, whatever. We can go on. So March 11th, 2011, you can click it another time. There was a tsunami in Japan, click it. The cesium cloud, the first lap across the U.S. was just about where we are. Anyway, the cesium falling out of the sky, human miscarriages in the next year doubled because of the cesium falling out of the sky from pollution a half a world away. All right, we can go on. Hit it again and then again. So we used to be able to see the dust, the danger coming. We used to see danger, click it again. But the modern day version is, I hope the guy on the right owns the ground on the left, or he's not being a very good neighbor. Okay, with all these chemicals, we can go on. We won't be able to hear this, but I think it was put out in 2006. If you've never seen this video, it's the year in 3 minutes. And it is crazy how red the top hemisphere, the northern hemisphere that would be, gets red starting around the end of March or the 1st of April. Well, it isn't because we all start driving every car we own for 24 hours a day for the next 6 weeks. We start stirring dirt, releasing not only CO2 into the atmosphere, but whatever chemicals were on that to give them a second chance at us. It's worth, you can just YouTube, you can Google this. We can go on. You have to do it twice. So, okay, we can go on because I already did this at the beginning. This is Rock Thompson, and since he started it, he said other than just his vaccinations, he hasn't had to give a cow a shot for anything. They have just stayed healthy. Go ahead. So 2 bags of conditioner, 25 pounds of enticer. Just click it. I think it's going to be a picture of 2 bags of conditioner and 1 bag of, a guy was using a lick tub. And so if you need that, put it out there, give them 2 or 3 days until they know what it is, and then you can put your conditioner and sea salt on top, so they have to eat their broccoli before they get to their ice cream. We can go on. Again. Lady in Texas. We'd always just been dumping it out, but she got out there and here's, half an inch of rain on top of the conditioner, so she poured it out. There was maybe 20 pounds of conditioner, 15. She put 5 pounds of sugar in there and just took a stick and kind of cut it in. She said when she came out the next morning, you would have thought she had just put out a brand new container. There was nothing left anywhere in there. So we were always throwing away conditioner. Well, just add some more enticer and they'll probably clean it up. We can go on. Guy, I'd been to his place in Manitoba about 2.5 years prior, and he was just so happy on Thanksgiving Day how black his black cattle were. When I showed up, they were the rusty red stuff. We can go on. These guys are in Springview, Nebraska. That's east of Valentine. And they had started a year earlier in August. And here they are in August the next year. And so they had a year under their belt of chewing these 4 things. We can go on. So I'm just an example of using cane sugar. If you're going to use sugar, I suggest you buy it in the plastic bag or it will draw moisture. If you're going to use sugar, when you open that bag, mix the whole thing or it will get hard on you. It may be more than you need, so you've got to store whatever you're mixing it in. But don't open a bag and leave it for a couple of weeks or you'll just have a chunk. We can go on. There was a fellow in Fallon, Nevada, who had high arsenic and high in the water and in the soil. And he'd tried every mineral known to man. He'd gone to getting his cattle in 6 times a year, every single one, and doing a drench of liquid mineral down their throat. He said if I waited 65 days, I could just see them start to go downhill. I said, well, you need to try the conditioner, but you're probably going to have to be half sugar, half conditioner. He called in a couple of days and said, well, they won't eat it. I said, well, go to 3/4 sugar. He called me up in a couple of days. Well, they're eating it now. He called me up in 2 weeks. He says, I didn't even have to put any sugar in it anymore. They're eating a half a pound a day. They finally found something that would put out the fire in their belly from all that arsenic. They were willing to eat the conditioner in a large volume. Well, if you put the conditioner out in your animals, don't raise your hand here. If your animals really go after it, you've got some fairly toxic animals. Okay? It's good at cleaning them up, but most people, 19 out of 20, 49 out of 50, are going to have enticer to get enough conditioner to get rid of those 50 million unique substances. We can go on. Add it to the stock tank. It keeps them a little cooler. Wendell was the one that pointed that out. We can go on. So just different deals about how to administer it. You can make your own covered. This lower right, that was at Brian Munger and Kirk Bruns. They had their mineral was in the tray and then their vinegar was in the old lick tub on the end, and they just drug it from pasture to pasture. We can go on. So if you've been using one of these and getting by, click it twice. You're going to need more rim space if you're going to do this sea salt conditioner bicarb deal. We can go on. And then JR found if he didn't put the mineral where the cattle were, they didn't consume much. We can go on. Again. So questions on the conditioner, and again, there's time tomorrow, and I don't know where we're at on our time, so I will keep on trucking unless I see a question. Okay, we can go on. Again, binds toxins, go ahead. Raises pH again, promotes the growth of biology in the gut, has minerals in it. You guys decided it's more than 50 now? Yeah. I'm seeing a nodded head, but I don't know how many. And in the conditioner, the minerals are not watered down by sodium chloride. So they're more concentrated, the ones that are there. They're not displaced by sodium chloride. So apple cider vinegar from the whole apples. Will Winter writes about this a lot. This outfit in Idaho, they exclusively whole apples. I think I told a little bit of that story. All vinegar, there's a 1-2 punch. All vinegar has punch 1, which is, even though it's acid, it's alkaline forming in the body. Animals that are alkaline digest and store more minerals than animals that are acid, which store way less, digest way less if they're in an acid state. So it raises pH, and then the other side is the enzymes from that whole apple, 20% or more. If you want to know the or more, ask me that question tomorrow and other ways to use it. If you're wanting to eat your own animal at home, I highly recommend a pint of it a day to that 1 or 2 animals you're going to kill for yourself the last week they're alive. Raises the pH, tenderization of meat, adds flavor. We can go on. Okay, so the main thing on this whole deal here is the particle length in the manure between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch. That is what you're looking for. Most places, 4 to 6 ounces is going to get you there. But you just need to look at the manure. Different times a year, you're going to need different amounts. But if you can get that particle length down to 1/4 to 3/8, basically you got everything there was to get out of that feed at that time of year. If it's green and growing, it's going to take less than if it's lignified in the middle of the summer or in a hay bale. We can go on. Am I doing something here? Oh, this is. Mix it in the stock tank, not metal. Take a 55-gallon barrel, cut the bottom out. You can put it in there. You can do a longer tray. Rubbermaid has a 100-gallon cattle stock tank. Well, they have a 50-gallon goat and sheep stock tank. One of those is about enough rim space for vinegar for 60 pair. Pour it onto the feed. A lick wheel tank where they lick it up. Usually, if you're using the Idaho stuff, you won't have to entice to begin with, but the problem you run in a week or two is they're consuming more than they actually need. Let's go on. So there's that Rubbermaid tub. Rock Thompson in South Dakota in the winter, he wanted them having the vinegar, but it was freezing. So he was taking a 50-pound bag of salt and putting it in something like this, and then 4 gallons of vinegar and stir it up. Come out tomorrow, if there was no liquid left on top, he'd add another gallon and stir it up, and stir it up, and stir it up. Pretty quick, the salt was all gone. So 50 pounds, 4 gallons, and then a gallon until it was all gone. About halfway through, he was mixing 10 pounds of cracked corn into it to try to get the consumption up. But what he did at the end of about 3.5 months of that was 4 or 5 ounces of sea salt a day and 5 or 6 ounces of vinegar. He didn't have to buy enticer, or very little, and the vinegar didn't freeze in the middle of the winter in northwest South Dakota. We can go on. Yeah, we can go on. Enzymes. Okay, this is a math thing. We can just skip through this slide. I hate doing math in a group. We go on until we get to the next slide. And again, Tom's got all this. Keep going. Yep. Okay, so here I am just filling a lick wheel tub at home, and I had the black tire, dead airspace, a lid. There's some salt in there as well. It had to get down to about 10 below before the wheels would stop turning, because it was just at my place. But then when they stopped turning, it had to warm up quite a bit before the wheels would start turning again. We can go on. So there used to be a heavy product that we were having to stir up, but we don't have that anymore in very large quantities. So we can go on. The deal on the left, we were using air. Yeah, this is just an explanation of that 4 gallons and stir a gallon, go on. So in the book, Factors Affecting Calf Crop, best book I ever read if you already know something about livestock. Now, Wally may disagree, Angus may disagree. This was first written in 46, updated in 64. Anyway, click the button one time. So here we are. We've got either high energy, medium, or low energy. In the protein, we're varying it, high, medium, and low in each category. Click it again. So if we're feeding low protein in a high energy diet, click it again, 40 instead of 2.06, 1/5 as much protein, click it again, we got the same number of animals pregnant. Energy is what gets cattle pregnant. Top third of the grass, that's where the energy is. If the urine is is too clear, you're not getting enough minerals in. If it's too yellow, you're eating too much protein. We want Goldilocks urine. Okay, so we can click it again. So here we are in the low energy, and we have low protein. Click it again. We got 4 pregnant. If we added energy, we didn't get any or very few. In a low energy, grass is all lignified. Kind of the worst thing you can do is spend your money on protein. Liquid molasses. You know, a lick tub, those are usually protein. The vinegar has some energy in it, but what you need when you're in a burned up situation is more energy. And this is right out of that factors affecting calf crop, which Tom will so happily provide to all. I'm giving him quite a job here. He's not smiling. We can go on. So Ian Mitchell, just taking that top 25, 30% and moving on. You're consuming the energy out of there. You get more cows bred. We can move on. Sodium bicarbonate, I talked about that one. There are 3 mines: Natural Soda, Rifle, Colorado; Genesis Calcium in Wyoming; Solvay, I said Genesis Calcium; Genesis Sodium Bicarbonate, and Solvay, Solvay, in Wyoming. Those are the 3 best ones out there. At the bottom there, a 1,500-pound cow doesn't have a gland system, 1.5 times the size of a 1,000-pound cow system. So there is an advantage to smaller cows. Sex hormones shut off long bone growth, so the taller a cow in any breed, the less fertile. Shorter cows are more fertile. Estrogen shuts off the long bone growth in the front end of the cow first. Here's her head. So the ones that look like they're walking downhill are producing more estrogen than the ones that are flat on top. Scarcity favors the smaller animal. We can go on. So if you see your cattle when it's hot, breathing hard, these ones that are late shedding, typically those will be the ones that you see breathing hard when the others aren't breathing quite so hard. They're just getting more and more and more acid. If they're too hot when the bull shows up, they don't get pregnant. We can go on. So if you go through your herd just before you put the bull in, the ones with the shaggiest hair coats are the least likely to breed. We can go on. Mineral water, if you can do that. If you don't have captive water, you can't. Well, then you can go to sea salt, 6 ounces. You may get by with less. I would try to get that. The Redmond conditioner for 9 months. Sodium, 2 ounces. I like to have the soda on hand in case you find yourself in a wreck, in a jackpot. The flies just increased. Hey, let's put more sodium bicarb out. If it's the natural soda especially, they'll really go after it. Early in the spring, when the grass is growing really fast, I don't know if you heard Wally say it this morning, but below 58 degrees, the grass does not, can't think of what his word, fix heavier metals. And so it's washy grass. They'll really go after the bicarb to balance their gut at that time. If you've had a period of 4, 5, 6 weeks without a rain, and then you get a big thunder lightning rainstorm, the lightning puts a lot of nitrogen in the grass, which turns into nitrate, and until you get 12 hours of sunlight. If it's cloudy for 2 or 3 days after this rainstorm, you have imbalanced grass. Whenever you see poop on the back of the cows, you're 2 or 3 days late getting the bicarb out there. Well, if you know you're going to have that quote-unquote $1 million rain tonight, tomorrow, once it stops, I would get out there with the bicarb and give them all they want until a full day of sunshine. And then the third time they'll really go after it is in the fall of the year when the grass starts frosting. 43 frost-free days, I heard. The chloride level in the grass goes up. Cattle are still looking for sodium, but not sodium bicarbonate, so they'll go, or excuse me, not sodium chloride, so they'll go after the sodium bicarbonate. We can go on. Okay, we saw a little of this earlier. This guy was spending $47 a year, and all of these things that didn't happen when he was spending the money on this program. We can do it again. So he was very happy with the cost of doing this. He's buying a lot of stuff, mixed and whatnot, but anyway, we can go on. Next year's calf crop will be better. That, you know, people buy a mineral so they don't have pink eye or foot rot or scours or whatever. I've told stories about how those things were all fixed, but the biggest benefit I think that you'll discover in the out years is how much better you express the genetics you already own. We can go on. So as you get your soil better, you'll need less and less and less of this. If you're rotationally grazing, if you're doing cover crops, if you're getting the minerals out there, whether it's through the cow in the dung piles, I mean, dung beetles, we're looking for dung beetles here. The less of what I just described you're going to need, we can go on. So any questions on that? I want to do a real short thing. I don't know how much time do we have. 20 minutes. Okay, so yes, sir.
What's your dung beetle index?
Cow pie that looks like you dropped a bunch of BBs in it. You know, that would be the drillers. And then the rollers, when I moved from the mountains down to where I live now, it took 4 years for the drillers to show up. Well, there's a number of different kinds. It took 7 for the rollers. They just get a ball, you know, maybe the end of the size of your little finger, and they roll it over and take it and stuff it down in the ground. And, you know, there are composters, if you will. I mean, dung beetles, worms, spiders, well, any kind of dragonflies, that sort of thing, butterflies. What can I, ladybugs. Those are all indicators that you're getting more and more and more biology in the soil, which is I just was talking about what do we do if we don't have that? You know, there's other talks to address getting the soil better. Yes, sir.
You showed a picture of the cadmium amount on the cow. The best way to take care of that is getting them to eat, you said, eating conditioner 7 to 10 ounces a day. Is that how you're going to take care of that? Will that actually get rid of that?
In most cases, yes. But the way to look at that is she's your miner's canary, saying, I have a cadmium problem. It is slowing down the production of all of my cattle. So, yeah, we can get that out of her, but it's like, this is affecting all the cows. I've got 3 of those in my herd, and wait a minute, my pregnancy rate went down 10% when I switched to this mineral, and I got those cadmium humps. I mean, am I saying that it's exactly that way? No, but if they're too hot, I forgot to say this part. The first thing cadmium does inside the cow is screws up her ability to regulate internal body temperature. She gets too hot in the summer, she gets too cold in the winter. And if you've got those humps, it's costing you pregnancies and more feed to keep her warm enough in the winter. So it was a timely question. You can get rid of it with conditioner and calcium, but then you got to say, why did I get it? Let's fix that problem long term.
And you said it comes from Chinese minerals, GMOs?
Not necessarily GMOs, but GMOs would have had NPK, all the sides, that sort of thing. So it would be commercial fertilizer. Yes. Interesting book about that is called Fateful Harvest, about how the co-op in Quincy, Washington was putting toxic chemicals in the fertilizer. Oh, your livestock, your soil, they need this. And here we've got plants that won't grow. We've got animals getting sick or dying. And can't think of the name. Duff Wilson was the author. It was kind of a Aaron Brockovich sort of a story. fateful harvest. Other questions about the mineral deal, and we're fair game tomorrow on all of that. So I wanted to just take a little bit of time to talk about the red Solo Cup cow. Okay, she's walking downhill. She's got a big belly. 3 commonalities, linear measurement wise, with old cows that have had 10 or 11 calves in a row without skipping. A bigger belly than the herd average. She can eat and digest enough for 3 in a dry year or after she's lost her teeth. A wider butt. I've got a couple of pelvises there on the table. You'll be able to see that. And then more slope from hooks to pins. To get out to 10 or 11 in a row without skipping, those are the 3 things linear measurement wise. In there, they didn't measure height of hip and height of shoulder, but sex hormones shut off long bone growth. Shorter animals are more fertile, and walking downhill is more fertile yet. Early shedding, and then butterfat indicators, which I'll get into here in a minute. So click it once. So the thymus, after the hair coat, generally overall, the thymus, well, there's a little dark spot running up the neck. It's hard to see, but on her, it's about 4 inches wide and maybe 20 inches long, kind of running at about a 60-degree up angle from her front knee towards her eyeball. I don't know if you can see that dark. The bigger that is, the healthier her gland system is overall. On that cow, it will be smaller in the winter on stored feed than it will be in the summer on green feed. Okay, we can click it again. So the adrenal hair whorl would be on the middle of the back, hopefully. Oops, let's click it again. Oh, I can't see it. What happened? Oh, it's all white and it's not showing up. So I'm gonna go down. Well, I didn't have to pick that up to use. So hopefully the adrenal hair whorl is in the middle of the shoulders. The further forward, the better. But typically you'll find it in this area. And it's a place where the hair is going 360 degrees. When a heifer first starts cycling, there will be 3, 4, 5 hairs stand up in the middle of that adrenal hair whorl. She's telling you, I'm starting to cycle. I'm producing estrogen now. And they'll remain standing until about a month after she gets pregnant, which they will lay down because she was sending progesterone back there to keep the corpus luteum going. And they'll remain laying down for 5.5 or 6 months until she needs a little bit of estrogen to turn the calf. Okay, now here's the part you're not going to believe. It's like, I don't believe anything he said the last hour and a half. Estrogen excites the hair. So at 8 months of pregnancy, if you're looking at a cow, I used to say Phyllis Diller, but if the hay is ready to cut, it's probably going to be a heifer calf, 75-80% accurate. If we've already swathed the hay, it's probably going to be a bull calf. The better the glandular function of your cows, the easier that is to breed. That was a bonus. I didn't have that in that slide. Let's see. Okay, so I was reading a book by a veterinarian named Hewitt, and he talked about this pointed pole. And about as small as I've seen on a cow is you think about taking a golf ball, cut it in half, and setting it up on top of the head. On a bull, if you took a tennis ball and cut it in half and set it up on top of the head, that's about as small as I've seen there. And I always like to see the hair all worn off here on the bull because it means he likes to practice basketball instead of sit on the couch and watch basketball. We can click it again. Okay, so the stifle muscle, you've got the hip socket, the stifle joint, the hock, and the ankle. The earlier in life you see that stifle muscle on a bull or a heifer, the more fertile the animal. All right? We can click it again. We want the hook bone up level with the backbone. If the hook bone's down, we lose slope from hooks to pins. That was that third thing on those older animals. We can click it again. So you see where the little dotted line is here. You don't see this too often, but if my hand is this, okay? So I'm looking at that from the top. If this is really fat, it's real low butter fat, real tough meat. If this is narrow, it's pretty good meat and butter fat. But if there is an indentation in that area where those dotted lines are, that is really tender meat with a lot of butter fat. Okay, we can do another one. So walking downhill on level ground, again, slope from hooks to pins. All this stuff should have been black. What did I do wrong? Click it again. Okay, vertical folds in the hide. If you can't get your hands on them, the more vertical folds there are, the looser the hide is. The looser the hide, the more butter fat, the more tender the meat. So number one for butter fat would be a bald udder, and number two for butter fat would be vertical folds in the hide. Number one for tender meat is fine bones. You think about right underneath the front knee, it gets real small and then ever so slowly widens out to the width of the front hoof. That's just exactly what you want to see. Big bones. I heard somebody this morning with big bones. That's tough meat. All right. So number two for tender meat is vertical folds in the hide. So it's a pretty good indicator of both. Click it again. So the further back those vertical folds go, again, the better. On this one, again, we're getting back to the back of the ribs. One more time. If we see a heifer or a cow, that got lost in the dark there, with vertical folds from the vulva down to the udder, if it's a heifer calf, they almost always turn into good cows. If it's a cow and you see that, they usually have a really good calf at their side. They're producing a lot of butter fat. We can go on. Okay, we can go on. So, yeah, I'll get into this a little more. Earlier in life, we do the right thing, the better it's going to turn out for us. Click it again. So, at the point of conception, did we have what they needed? Hey, we're moving over this way. We're expressing our livestock better. Click it again. Okay, I kind of already did that. One more time or two more. One again. One more time and one more. So, I told you about Steve Swarzik and the 10 ounces of sea salt on those weaned calves. A guy in Arizona who was, shall we call it late weaning, 10-month weaning. This didn't become apparent in our conversation until a little later. He runs 1,000 cows on 250,000 acres. So it's 250 acres for one cow to make a living. Okay? He called me up in August and said, normally I have to wean the calves off of these first calf heifers at 3 months of age to get them to breed back, but they're not losing body condition this year like they normally do. Well, Kelly, did you get more than your normal 4 inches of rain? Different mineral, different bulls? No. And finally I go, Kelly, how long did you leave those heifers on their mother? And he thought about it for a little bit. He says, that was the first time I tried that 10-month weaning. I said, that was kind of a leap of faith to do that. He said, yeah, it was. Well, we're talking off and on, and we still do. But about 2.5 years later, he said, of all of the things I have tried out here on the Arizona Strip, weaning at 10 months is the most profitable thing I've ever done because it turns those heifers into cows right off the bat. You're developing the villi in the rumen by leaving the calf on for a long time. Anyway, he said, you could not pay me $100 a replacement heifer to wean her before 10 months of age. We can click again. So Anibal Por Domingo got his PhD at New Mexico State. I believe it was 95. The average beef cow in the U.S. was digesting 55% of what she ingested. That was what his thesis was about. Well, he heard Gerald Fry talk probably about 2000, went back and got his research papers out and found there were some cows digesting 70%. I suggest the ones with the big bellies. And then there were some cows, to average 55, I suggest the ones with no guts, were only digesting 40. I was in Ohio at a guy's place. He had a hodgepodge. I said, these are your best cows. These will work for you until you can replace them. But these 3 Herefords, I'm not against Herefords, but these were bad Herefords. He was around a round bale feeder. I said, you're just not ever going to make any money. So the next morning, he takes me to the airport, and when I turn my phone on, here's a message from him. He said, I've been thinking about those 3 Herefords. He said, all the other cows, they eat for, a couple hours, get a drink, eat a little more, they lay down, start chewing their cud. Those Herefords just stand there at the round bale feeder and they eat all day long. They are going to the sale barn on Monday. Well, 95, here's Annabelle. Don Faulkner, 2013, he was at a deal in southern Utah, Arizona State. He said, we're getting really good at predicting percent of body weight that a group of dry cows or yearlings or calves might eat depending on what we feed them. But what we can't tell you is what individuals in those groups are eating. Some are eating twice as much as others. So if they were averaging 3% of body weight, some were eating 2%. I posit that it's the big bellies, and some were eating 4%, the Herefords, of their body weight. So do you want the 1,000-pound cow that everybody talks about, or do you want the efficient cow? And that's a different talk. Red Solo Cup, it's on my website. We can go another slide here. Okay, the end of my diatribe. Any questions about that little short Red Solo Cup or anything on the minerals? And again, I'll be at the booth. We've got tomorrow. Find me anytime. There's some handouts there, business cards, that sort of thing.
How do I tell my minerals are coming from China?
If they have any problem, just not looking you in the eye and say, no, we've guaranteed that, you kind of got to assume that they do. Are you having any trouble?
Not that I think of.
You don't get pink eye, foot rot, scours, any of that?
Never pink eye.
Excellent.
I've never had pink eye.
If it isn't broke, the question is, how do I know if my minerals are coming from China? If it isn't broke, don't fix it. Most people that I talk to, they're in the middle of problems.
So I got to believe the manufacturer. Whether it be
You-
ADM, Hubbard, whoever.
Well, if it was ADM or Purina, I don't know that I would believe them, just like I wouldn't believe, well, that was
I work for
political.
ADM, that's why I'm asking.
Okay. I just slapped him across the face. It's 95% of the mixed minerals out there to compete on price are getting the individual ingredients out of China. But it is a good question. How do I know? Unless you can look them in the eye, and
Yeah, they ain't going to say that.
they're not going to say. If you're not having problems, don't worry about it. Okay. The more minerals you can get in, and the more of the conditioner you can, you pull the neighbor's toxins out, the less feed you're going to need. Okay. They're eating extra to fight off the toxins. They're lacking the minerals in those grasses, so if they get it through the sea salt or the mineral water, they don't need to eat as much of your forage. Other questions?
Another quick one on your mineral water setup.
Mineral water.
The tea bag goes in the still end. Does that water have to always be flowing?
Good question, because I didn't put this in. The tea bag goes in the still end, the end that the water's not coming in. We put it in down there. It takes a while for those minerals. You watch it, and there's kind of a cloud comes out, and pretty quick it's clear. Okay, cattle will come up and drink. I want to say this a different way. An S curve. Okay, so here's your water. And then we put the tea bag in there, and an S-curve would just flatten off to normal ocean water. But the sodium chloride just keeps climbing. So if we left it in there for a couple of days, we might be 26, 28% sodium chloride. Well, we put it in there, it almost reaches homeostasis, and some cows come up and drink. More water comes in, more minerals come out of the tea bag. We never started climbing on sodium chloride. You really start climbing on sodium chloride after 4 or 5 hours of no use. Okay? That was a good question because I failed to explain that part about cattle drink, more water comes in, more minerals come out. Cattle drink, more minerals come out. Yes, ma'am. Pardon?
So you're running on a float?
It is, yeah. I'll be right there. One tank, not metal, on a float. There's a way to do it without a float, but unless you're wanting to do that, let's not talk about that here. Catch me at the booth, catch me tomorrow, because I don't want to confuse anybody, because I've had people go away, including some big names, and said that didn't work. And any place you do it right, it just absolutely works. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and that's my question, because our cattle go, like, they'll be there early in the morning and they get a drink, and they'll go out to pasture, and we have ponds and streams that run through the property, and they hang out down there and they graze and they eat and they load.
They drink. Mm-hmm. Pond streams, yeah.
Yeah, and then they'll come back up late in the evening, so the water may not be drank out of up in the barn. And sometimes they don't come back up. Like, they'll stay out there grazing and local.
There's a way to do it without a float, and catch me at the I don't want to confuse anybody, because I have in the past. Right. And I don't want this part of A and part of B and part of C, and it doesn't work. Because if you do it right for the situation that you have, it really does work. But we'll talk about how to do it without a float.
Okay, just to get some clarity, what you're putting in there, is it the conditioner?
No, it is the sea salt. It is, and what's left in the bag is the excess sodium chloride and any imbalance, out of balance minerals, excess minerals. Well, you've got a little bit of unused salt, sea salt left when you dump it out.
The garlic?
I would buy the number 10 just to make your mineral water, because the garlic won't do a thing. It's just in your tea bag. It's not going to really help you out to have the garlic.
Do I need to do the water if they're eating my...
You don't have to, but you need more ounces dry, which will take an enticer. And it's not the same mineral balance as our blood. The mineral water, this is the fastest way to change out those red blood cells over the course of the next 120 days. Okay, good question. And let's talk about without a float somewhere else. Yes, ma'am.
What are your thoughts on kelp?
Before we do that, thank you, Vanna, for the help with the... What are my thoughts on kelp? Those are the 92 minerals attached to a carbon atom through a plant. 90% bioavailable. It is excellent, and so is the price. There was a dairy that questions my thought on kelp. There was a raw milk dairy about 10 miles away, and I was telling them about all this. They were feeding kelp. They made the mineral water, and she told me for the first 3 weeks, they wouldn't touch the kelp. At 1/25 the cost, they didn't want to touch it. I thought that was quite a story. Is this a good enough advertisement, Margene? Am I doing all right here? The questions? I appreciate your patience. That takes a long time to go through. I did this for the Canadians at the beginning of 21, and we had 2 hour-and-a-half long sessions, part 1 and part 2, to get through all of it. I skipped through some that I didn't feel was maybe quite pertinent because we had a little bit of a time crunch, but as long as it was, that was a time crunch. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have most of this information on your website?
The question is, do I have most of this information on my website? I do. I've got them in my hand. Anyway, on the website there is a tab called videos, and there are 9 or 10 either podcasts or that 2-part deal with the Canadians. There's a Eastern Montana grazing group. I did the Red Solo Cup cow with the PowerPoint. I talked to Clay Conry, I think 3 different times. So that's just an audio, there's no pictures. Brian Alexander, Ranching Reboot. I can't remember what else is on there, but there's quite a bit on the website. I was just talking to Clay Conry about getting him being the moderator of a Zoom Q&A call with like Burke, Tykert, Wally, myself, a couple of others, where he might have some prepared questions, but you could then text or type in a question, and we'd start with, okay, we start here, and then the next time we start here, and you're last, and the next time we start to answer these different questions. Or maybe if one was more geared towards what Wally knew or what Burke Tykert knew, and he liked the idea, but he's got to think about how we set that up. Anyway, other questions? I do appreciate your patience with me. And I want to tell you, I've never used a microphone stand as a pointer before. Okay, well, we can probably get out of here. Thank you.